What if the reason you struggle to trust yourself isn't because you've lost your intuition, but because you've stopped listening to it? Stay tuned for a heartfelt conversation about self trust for women and how rebuilding confidence begins by honoring your own inner voice. Welcome back to the Resilient MD, the podcast and YouTube channel where we have honest conversations about medicine, burnout, resilience, and how to care for others without losing ourselves in the process. I'm your host, Dr. Anna McDowell, certified life coach, allergist, and firm believer that small changes can create massive ripple effects. I am so glad you're here today because I want to explore something that quietly changes everything. It doesn't happen all at once, and it usually isn't visible to anyone else, but once it begins, it influences every decision you make. Today, we're talking about learning to trust yourself again. I say again very intentionally because I don't believe most women lose the ability to trust themselves. In my experience, they simply become so practiced at listening to everyone else that their own voice becomes difficult to hear. That isn't a character flaw. It's often the result of years of living in an environment where being responsive, dependable, and selfless was rewarded. Today, I'd like to take the next step together because wanting a different life is one thing, but trusting yourself enough to begin creating it is something else entirely. In my experience, self trusting isn't something we suddenly discover, it's something we slowly rebuild. And like any meaningful relationship, it grows one little interaction at a time. One of the questions I've been asking myself lately is this: when did I stop believing what I already knew? Not in medicine. Interestingly, I trusted myself there. If a patient sat in front of me describing symptoms, years of training and experience allow me to recognize patterns, and I could gather information, weigh the possibilities, and make decisions with confidence. But outside the exam room, it was different. When the decision involved my own life, I often found myself asking other people what they thought first. I would discuss it with my husband, I would ask friends, I would make lists, I research every possible outcome. None of those things are inherently bad. Seeking perspective is often very wise. But looking back, I can now see that there were times when I wasn't looking for information. I was actually looking for someone to reassure me that what I already felt was acceptable. There is an important difference between seeking wisdom and outsourcing your own judgment. I didn't recognize that difference for a long time. In coaching, I often meet women who describe themselves as indecisive. They will say things like, I've never been good at making decisions, or I second guess everything. What I've observed is that many of these women make excellent decisions and important decisions every single day. They diagnose complex medical conditions, they lead teams, they raise families, they solve problems that affect countless lives. They are not incapable of making decisions at all. They're simply less accustomed to trusting themselves when the decision is personal. Just like I was. I started to ask myself why. Why does that happen? And this is what I came up with. Because personal decisions don't come with clinical guidelines. And also, they are trying to make everyone involved happy, which is virtually impossible. Just think about it. There isn't a textbook that tells you whether it's time to change jobs, whether it's time to set a boundary, whether it's okay to want a slower life, whether you've given enough. Those decisions require something medicine doesn't often teach us. They require learning to trust our own internal experience. I also think there is something unique about physicians that contribute to this. From the first day of medical training, we are taught to seek evidence, to verify, to consult, to avoid assumptions. Those habits make us better clinicians for sure. But if we're not careful, they can spill into every area of our lives. Eventually, we begin believing that every important decision requires external confirmation, requires research, advice, consensus, requires proof. Yet, some of the most meaningful decisions we make in life cannot be proven in advance. You cannot collect randomized controlled trials about whether a particular version of your life will make you happier. At some point, evidence must be balanced with self knowledge. And that can feel uncomfortable for people who have spent decades being rewarded for certainty. Now, there is another reason why self trust becomes difficult, particularly for women. Many of us have spent years receiving subtle messages that our instincts should be questioned. If we speak up, we're emotional. If we hesitate, we are uncertain. If we change direction, we are inconsistent. If we prioritize ourselves, we're selfish. Over time, those messages become internalized. And instead of asking, what do I know? We begin asking, will everyone else agree with what I know? Those are very different questions, and only one of them leads to self trust. Before we move on, I want to pause for a moment. I'm curious, have you been feeling exhausted, discouraged, or frustrated and not quite sure why? Are you quietly wondering if this is just how life in medicine has to be? Well, I see you. You don't have to give up on yourself or your dreams. And the good news is that you don't have to figure it all out alone. I built a 6-week one-on-one coaching program designed to help women physicians gently remove the barriers keeping them stuck and rediscover clarity, balance, and purpose. It is called the Resilient MD, just like the podcast and YouTube channel. If you're ready, you can begin today. Schedule your free clarity call. The link is in the show's notes. One of the most surprising discoveries I've made over the past year is that self-trust doesn't arrive as confidence. It arrives as quiet consistency. It grows every time you keep a small promise to yourself. Every time you notice that you are tired and actually rest. Every time you recognize that something no longer fits and allow yourself to acknowledge it instead of arguing with yourself. Every time your internal experience and your external choices become a little more aligned. That is how trust develops, not through grand declarations, through repeated evidence that you are willing to listen to yourself. I often compare self trust to rebuilding a friendship. Imagine having a friend who repeatedly ignored everything you told her, every concern, every need, every limit. Eventually, you would probably stop confiding in that person. In many ways, that's exactly what happens inside us. If every time our intuition whispers, slow down, we answer, not now. If every time our body says, this isn't sustainable, we respond, just keep pushing. Eventually, those signals become quieter, not because they disappear, but because we've taught ourselves that no one is listening, including us. One of the most compassionate thing we can do is begin rebuilding that friendship, that relationship, not by expecting dramatic insights, but by becoming someone our own inner voice can trust again. One of the women I coached shared something that has stayed with me. She told me, I don't know who I am anymore. As we explored that statement, it became clear that she hadn't lost herself overnight. She had simply become so skilled at meeting expectations that she had stopped checking whether those expectations still aligned with the woman she wanted to become. By the end of our work together, she said something very different. I still don't have every answer, but I trust that I will know when something is right for me. Notice the difference? She didn't gain certainty, she gained confidence. Confidence in her ability to navigate uncertainty. And perhaps that's what self trust really is. As we continue this journey together, I'd like to leave you with the question that I've been reflecting on myself. Not what should I do next, but where in my life have I been asking everyone else to believe in me before I believe in myself? You don't have to answer that today. In fact, I hope you don't rush to answer it. Simply carry it with you this week. Notice what comes up. Notice whose voice you hear first when you're making a decision. And gently ask yourself whether your own voice has a seat at that table. Because learning to trust yourself is rarely one dramatic moment. It is a relationship. And like every meaningful relationship, it grows stronger every time you choose to show up with honesty, consistency, and compassion. Remember, my wings grow when I listen. If this episode helped you pause and reflect, consider sharing it with a colleague. Next week, we will talk about how important it is to protect your attention. I think you will enjoy that. Subscribe and join me for the next episode. But before you go, don't forget to grab the free People Pleasing Reflection Guide. It's a gentle space for high achievers to slow down, reflect, and reconnect with yourself again. You can download it at the link in the description. If this episode gave you something valuable, would you share the love? A quick 5-star review on Apple Podcast or your favorite platform and a like on YouTube helps spread the word and keeps this content coming your way. And if you have extra minutes to spare, some written kind words will really uplevel the show's game and will be very much appreciated. Thank you for being here. Thank you for trusting me with your time. And more importantly, thank you for beginning the quiet work of trusting yourself. I'm Dr. Anna McDowell, a resilient MD just like you. I'll see you next week.